Okay, so we talked about the main pathway, the general pathway of the air when we breathe. And we talked about the different phases or subdivisions of respiration. We're also going to talk about the actual breathing process. So, what parts are involved in breathing? This is the second video or second part to the video lessons. The first line here is talking about the main parts that we've already identified along the pathway. So air goes in through your mouth and nose, goes through your trachea, down into your bronchi, your bronchioles, and alveoli. There's a couple of the little parts that we're going to talk about along the way, but those are the key parts. Accessories that help out are your diaphragm, your ribs, and your intercostal muscles. So those are the inter means between, and costal refers to your ribs, so the muscles between your ribs. If you were to look at your skeleton, we were looking at the skeleton in class, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pairs of ribs that are attached to our main breastbone, the sternum. And then we have 1, 2, 3 that are attached to that bottom 7th one. And then we have 2 pair, you can see them better on this side, but we have 2 pair of floaters. And so they all enclose and protect the lungs and the heart. So this cavity inside of here that houses your lungs and your heart is known as the thoracic cavity. And along the bottom of the rib cage, separating the thoracic cavity from your abdominal cavity, would be your diaphragm. Okay, so if we look a little closer at the lungs, and we did a little drawing that you should check with others, and it's pretty simple and it shows a lot when you do it. Okay, it's a really good little study tool, so you should check into what they've done, or ask and I can help you do it. So we have 1 pair of lungs that's found in the thoracic cavity, which we just talked about. This right lung is larger, a little larger than your left one because of where the heart is positioned. So you can see it a little better here. This one's larger than this one. It has 3 lobes, whereas the left one has 2. And they're surrounded and protected by 2 membranes. They're called pleura. The first one that lies right on the lung tissue, or right on the organ, is called the visceral pleura. And viscera means internal organ. So it is the membrane that lies right on the lung tissue. The one that's outside of that, I lost my cursor again. The one that's outside of that, that's kind of peeled back on the outer part, is the parietal pleura, and parietal is kind of to the outside of. In between the two, there's a space, and that is known as the pleural cavity. And there's some fluid in there that prevents them from sticking and prevents friction. So it helps to reduce friction if your lungs come in contact with the rib cage. This I would have given as a blank diagram that you were supposed to label. Okay, so this is the respiratory tract. When you breathe in through your nasal cavity or through your mouth cavity. The air comes down into this space. This is that special space called the pharynx. Okay, so this is where if you went to swallow pop, or you took in some spaghetti and all of a sudden you coughed, then it can come out through your nose. So that's your pharynx. Also in this space, things can go down through your esophagus, through your food tube, or down through your breathing tube, your trachea. Okay, so there's a special part called your epiglottis, and that's a flap that covers and protects your trachea and prevents food from going down there, prevents you from choking. Okay, at the top of the trachea, we have the larynx, and the larynx has your vocal cords in it, as your voice box. There's the rest of the trachea. The trachea has cartilage, again, to hold it open. That's cartilage rings. And so do the bronchi. So here's the left and right bronchus. Okay, bronchi plural. And each bronchus then branches into smaller tubes called bronchioles. So these larger ones, the bronchi, have cartilage, rings, but the bronchioles are too small. If we were to take one of the bronchioles out, and kind of blow it up, then at the very end of it you would find almost looks like a bunch of grapes, and those are the alveoli. Alveolus for one, alveoli for bunch. Okay. Your diagram isn't in color, so you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell that this is deoxygenated blood and this is oxygenated blood, but all these little vessels that are surrounding the alveoli are the capillaries, and that allows for the gas exchange because of the close contact. Other labels that are on here, we have one for the left lung, so this is labeling the left lung, and the right lung, the muscles between your ribs, the intercostal muscles, and a rib here. The diaphragm, which is a dome-shaped muscle that separates the thoracic cavity and the abdominal cavity, and also part of the brain that looks after your breathing, which is the medulla oblongata. Okay, so this is part of the brain stem. We've talked about it in chapter 9 because it also looks after your heart rate and vasodilation, vasoconstriction, movement of blood through your vessels. There's some animations that are really good to watch that would help you for understanding respiration and different aspects of it, so make sure that you check those out. They're linked on the class notes page, and I'll probably also link them in Edmodo too. In terms of the breathing process, you should be able to describe it in terms of volume and pressure. Okay, so if you take a big breath in, okay, when you inhale, your diaphragm is pulling downwards and your rib cage is pulling up and out. So it does that because the muscles that are on the outside between your ribs, the external intercostal muscles, are contracting, pulling towards each other. And because your rib cage is kind of moving outward and upward and your diaphragm is moving downward, that increases the volume that's in your chest cavity. And when you increase the volume, it decreases the pressure exerted by gases inside. So, we've said before that gases move from an area of high pressure to an area of low pressure. So they're going to move from the atmosphere where it's higher pressure down into the chest cavity where there's lower pressure. Okay, so that's why air is drawn in when that happens. The opposite happens when you're exhaling. Oh dear, that's not what I wanted to do. There we go. Okay, so when you're exhaling, your chest cavity is going to push inward or move back down because your diaphragm is going to relax and go back dome-shaped, and your internal intercostals are going to contract while your external ones take a break. Okay, so it pulls your rib cage down and in. So the volume inside your chest cavity would decrease and the pressure would increase, forcing the air out because the pressure in your chest cavity would be higher than what's out in the atmosphere. So there's a good animation on that. Okay. You'll see this graph. This is in your book. I think it's around page 341 if I remember right. You'll see this graph when we do the little lab activity where you're using what's called a spirometer. Usually when they do such a thing, they're checking to see what your lung capacity is, your vital capacity really. Okay, so this is the volume of air in your lungs versus time. And this is if you were breathing normal breaths. So in, out, in, out, in, out. And then all of a sudden you take a great big breath as big as you can in, and then a great big breath as far as you can force it out, as much as you possibly can, and then a normal breath, normal breath. So the normal breath that we have, like this pattern here, that is your tidal volume, that amount. So it would be about 500 mils of air that's normally going in and out. Okay, this part from the top of these little waves to the very, very top up here, that is called your inspiratory reserve volume. And that is how much extra you could breathe in if you needed to. So if you were going to maybe go underwater or something, or you're going to blow up a balloon, then you would probably breathe in that huge amount of extra air. Okay? This volume down here is kind of the opposite. It's the expiratory reserve volume. Okay, so it is the amount that you can force out, the maximum amount you can force out after what you've normally breathed out. So, if this is the highest amount you can breathe in, and this is the lowest, or the farthest you can breathe out, then this is kind of showing you, okay, well, this is the maximum amount of lung volume that kind of goes in and out of my lungs typically. So that is called your vital capacity. That is the amount of air that you can breathe in and out of your lungs. Okay? Not the normal amount that you would tend to, but the amount that you possibly can use. Breathe in, breathe out, the maximum. But there's this extra little bit down here, okay, that never gets breathed out, and that's important. It's called the residual volume. There's always a residual amount that's left in your lungs so they don't totally collapse and stick together. Okay, so if you were to count that as well as your vital capacity, that tells you your total lung capacity. What is the total volume that your lungs can hold? Well, that's all fine and good. Maybe you have a great lung capacity. Maybe you can take in a whole lot of air. But if you don't have a very good efficiency or respiratory efficiency, then it doesn't help you all that much. Okay, so it's one thing to have a really good lung capacity, but you also want to have a good respiratory efficiency. So that's another term that we describe what your lung is capable of, what your lungs are capable of doing. That tells us the rate at which oxygen can be transferred across into your bloodstream. So how effective your lungs are at getting the oxygen in. Now, I think we're going to do regulation. We can do regulation. Okay. So, just like we talked about regulation of your blood pressure and regulation of your heart rate and regulation of your body temperature, we're also going to talk about regulation of your breathing. Now, we have two different types of sensors, and they both will kick in at during different situations in your body. Normally, when you're just having normal breathing or normal activity, it'll be your carbon dioxide sensors that will kick in. Okay, so they're always monitoring, and they will kick in if there's an increase in carbon dioxide. So if you're using more oxygen, maybe you were doing something that was more strenuous, so you use more oxygen, that's going to produce more carbon dioxide, and that's a sign, hey, we need to get rid of that carbon dioxide and get in some more oxygen. Okay? So, those sensors are found right in your brain. They're right in the medulla oblongata. Okay? So, once they detect that there's an increase in carbon dioxide, they're going to send a message to the effectors that actually look after your breathing rate. And those are the muscles that we already talked about, the diaphragm and your intercostal muscles. So, it sends a message to them and says, hey, we need to get rid of this excess carbon dioxide, and in the meantime, bring in some O2. So, they increase your breathing movements.
Marilyn McDonald to the office with your pictures.
Sorry. The other type of sensor only works at certain times. Okay? It only works if there's not an increase in CO2. So, there are certain times when the CO2 levels are normal, but for some reason, there's a decrease in oxygen. So these sensors are found in your carotid arteries, important because they are bringing oxygen to your brain, and also in your aorta, also important because they are bringing oxygen to your heart and all your other body tissues. So these ones kick in, again, when CO2 levels are normal, but oxygen levels are low. And that could be the case when you're at a higher level of altitude, so maybe you're on a mountain or something that you're not used to